Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Percolate on a particular mix of odd and inspiring news headlines in Wendy's Coffee House. Newsmakers with a penchant for the unknown, unexplained, and unusual share their experiences with UFOs, ghost encounters, near-death experiences, and more for your own unique blend of Wendy's Coffee House Curious. And now, here's Wendy.
And I'm curious. Really curious. I've seen these videos on the time travelers. This seems to be a trend because the first, there might have been the one time travel guy from Art Bell years ago, and he got all the publicity. He disappeared, fell off the face of the planet. But now it seems that there is a whole channel dedicated, aside from YouTube, but mostly YouTube, dedicated to time travelers. The most recent, and this is Apex TV, it says he's from the year 6491, and that Earth will be dominated by artificial intelligence. Everybody on the planet, if you have a home, will have an AI device, and it will do all the basic tasks, kind of like a very efficient robot. But he says there will be a single government, and the thing I find fascinating is what kind of shape the planet will be in. He doesn't go into the ecological, whether by then we'll see some action from Yellowstone. Now, the scientists are saying that the supervolcano, you've seen it's a lot more active now. They can actually see how fast that the molten rock is bubbling up, which before they weren't sure what was going on with the magma, and it looks like it's beginning to be supercharged, which isn't helping that all the other volcanoes are starting to pick up a little activity too. They say, "Oh, don't worry, it's not a problem." And I remember reading a little thing right before the second massive blast in Hawaii that that was going to go into a quiet period right before there was more activity. The other thing, too, is Nessie, the webcam. This is the best sighting, and I hope this isn't faked. 10 minutes on a video. He said he saw something. For his entertainment for lunch, he watches the webcam for Nessie, and a lot of people do this. A woman in the U.S. did that, I think, last year. Anyway, 10 minutes, and you can see he said he grabbed his cell phone and started, just as soon as he saw the activity, started filming away. And so even the guy who's there, who monitors this and has his own Nessie cam and his website, says, this is the best one. And it's the second recorded that they've gotten this year that seems like it might have a little bit of relevance. They also, the guy up there who's doing the DNA, the search for the Nessie with the DNA, he said, even if they don't find any evidence, that does not mean that Nessie isn't there. It just means they haven't found any evidence. There's a saying that goes, a lack of evidence doesn't mean evidence of lack. Absence of evidence doesn't mean, okay. You know what I'm talking about. My guest, Stephen, and it's Stephan, okay? I'm going to be corrected on this. Stephan Schwartz, and we've talked with him before, but I wanted to bring him back because last time we talked about Awakening, a novel of aliens and consciousness, which I love. Great story, and he has the background to know if any of this is legit, whether he's, all of that's in the book or not. Well, we'll just leave that up in the air. We'll let him talk about that. And then the 8 laws of social change. I think we did an interview on that here too, but the 8 laws of change, how to be an agent of personal and social transformation. Those are his 2 books. Today we're going to talk about telepathy because it fits. All right? And he is going to tell me what he thinks. All right, Stephan, you're going to blow everybody's mind when you say this. Okay? And what about telepathy?
Well, in the late 19th century, early 20th century, there was a shift. Before that, consciousness was not considered to be part of science, and in many ways, in large areas of science, it still isn't. The materialist paradigm obtains. But beginning in the late 19th, early 20th century, psychology and psychiatry and parapsychology all began, and many of the same people were involved in all three movements. And this was basically a shift in consciousness away from the Council of Trent. Between 1545, 1563, the Roman Catholic Church had a series of 25 meetings, and the net was that consciousness, they said, was the purview of the church, and scientists could have all the material stuff to space and time. And if you went into their area, why they'd kill you, and they did. That was what the Inquisition was about. Anyhow, in the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, this view that consciousness was not a part of science began to change with the development of psychology, psychiatry, and parapsychology. And Frederick Myers, in I think it was 1882, 1887, coined the word telepathy. And he did that because they were thinking at the time about telegraphy, telephony, because that was the hot area of science, rather like the rise of computers and the Internet in the 20th century, end of the 20th century. So being involved with telephones and telegraph and all that, that was really hot stuff. And the research that they were looking at in the consciousness area looked like sort of walkie-talkies. The walkie-talkies hadn't come along yet, but rather like that telepathy was this word that was coined by Frederick Myers, was rather like you were sending a message to someone. And for a long time, into the 50s, into the 60s, many people who were interested in what today we would call non-local consciousness effects had a model of how this worked that was about senders and receivers and signals as if it were an electromagnetic phenomenon. In 1977, I did a submarine experiment to test that idea, continuing the work of a Soviet physiologist named Leonard Vasiliev. Vasiliev had asked the same question, and that is non-local consciousness electromagnetic in nature? And he had tested that idea by putting people down into mine shafts and into caves and putting them in Faraday cages down in mine shafts and caves. And he reported in a series of reports, which I was then in government, which somebody in the CIA got hold of, and so a friend in the CIA sent them over to me. It's all been declassified now, in which he said that he had done all these experiments and it didn't make any difference. Shielding from electromagnetic radiation didn't make any difference, and the only thing that could possibly explain it that was electromagnetic was ELF, extreme low frequency. And the only way to protect against that would be to put somebody in a submarine, and he wasn't able to do that. In 1977, I was able to do that, and I put people down in a submarine and asked them to perform non-local tasks, in this case, remote viewing where people were hidden, were hiding, and didn't make any difference, just as reported by Vasiliev. Electromagnetic shielding didn't make any difference. The people that were doing these were shielded, and not only shielded, but the Navy had spent a great deal of money because they wanted to communicate with the deep ocean submarines, the missile submarines, and they were interested in ELF because that was the part of the electromagnetic spectrum that would penetrate the deepest into the ocean. So they knew they had spent a lot of money to find out just how deep it would penetrate, and if you got below that, then it wouldn't happen. So we put people below that. It didn't make any difference. They did just as well as if they were up on the surface. So therefore, that the argument is that electromagnetic radiation of any kind that cannot explain what's going on. And more than that, that it is not a matter of sending signals. So the idea of mind-to-mind communication, telepathy, as if you were a walkie-talkie, maybe that's even too dated. People don't know what walkie-talkies are anymore. But anyway, as if you were a kind of cell phone calling another cell phone, isn't really the right way to think about it. It's much more like doing a Google on the Internet, where the message you send out gets broken into little packets that all go out and then get reassembled at the place where they're intended to go.
Hold on. Okay, I'm talking with Stephan Schwartz, and we have to take a quick break. I want to take a quick break and come back, but I want to get into how that relates to then the story that you wrote about with awakening and the alien and consciousness and how that works. Is that okay?
Right.
Okay, all right. So we're going to take a quick break. It's Wendy's Coffee House. My guest, Stephan Schwartz. And if he sounds familiar, it's because it's that remote viewing thing, okay? And some of this stuff is declassified. He can finally spill a few beans on that. We don't know if he'll do it right now, but, there's always that hope. Next on Wendy's Coffee House. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. Thank you for listening. Remember, if you miss anything, I'll put the links on the website. You can catch up with that. Stephan Schwartz. And this is so fascinating because his experience with studying consciousness and working with the remote viewers and a lot of his history is exactly what we're talking about when we're thinking about, well, why does he qualify to talk about telepathy? Because this is part of his background and up close and personal research. He's studying consciousness for some 40 years or so, and how that kind of, how we connect with things that you call non-local consciousness now is what you referred to. But there was an interview last time about awakening, and that was the novel that you talked about, the aliens. And so off the air, I said, okay, was there any kind of UFO alien connection? And I'm surprised. Yes, there was one. I hadn't heard about this. So how did this factor in?
Well, I guess probably in the late 80s, I was approached by a group of scientists from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California to see if there were the remnants of a spacecraft, an extraterrestrial spacecraft, that could be located. And okay, we'll give it a try. So we got the remote viewers organized. I have a particular way of doing this to get very high-quality information, highly accurate information. And I asked, I think it was 12 or 13 viewers to locate, if first of all, was there any remnants of a spacecraft, and two, to locate it if there was and describe it. And to my surprise, to be honest, they all located the same place in White Sands, New Mexico, on the it's where they did the atomic testing. So it's a federal restricted area. Anyway, so they located it it's up in the mountains, where they said pieces of this craft could be found. So we applied to be able to go down and to do that, and they wouldn't let us do it. So I was never able to test it, but I have the location.
Okay,
so we'll, I don't know, maybe someday somebody will get permission to go up in those hills and see if it's there.
Okay, that's a mystery worth solving. We'll see if maybe
that's what I thought.
Mr. Bigelow might be able to tap into the...
I don't know, Bob. I didn't know that I ever told him about this. I didn't really talk about it because we were never able to test it, so I had no accuracy score as to how good the data was. And I mean, I know what the track record was, but I was never able to actually do the field work, so I never talked about it.
Okay, you and Bob need to connect. Okay, just just in case. I want to go back into The Awakening, the novel that you wrote, because I really, really like that. And you do touch on something that would be considered telepathy. And I've had an experience where I had something that was given to me, and I call it telepathic because I don't have another word for it, but it is in your head, you hear a voice, you hear information. It isn't yours. It is an audible. It sounds like a voice. And so, what do you call that? Because that's what you're describing in the connection here with this novel of aliens and consciousness. What is that kind of communication?
Well, what people call when I said that I don't believe in telepathy, that is, I don't believe people are like walkie-talkies. That doesn't mean that I don't think that there is not non-local linkage. That's a different issue.
Okay.
It's just that it's not like a walkie-talkie. It's much more like you open to the non-local domain of information, which is rather like getting access to the Internet as a metaphor, and suddenly you can do a search and locate and link up with any site in the world. But it's not that you're directly connecting with that person. It's sort of consciousness to unity to consciousness, if you see what I mean.
Okay, is that what the psychics or what people who are more metaphysically using their terminology, Akashic records, is that something like that?
Yes, that's exactly what the idea of the Akashic record, which really gets started with Edgar Cayce and the Theosophists. But if you go back to a German polymath named, at the end of the 19th century, named Adolf Bastian, he formulated what he called, my German is, I can't pronounce it properly, but it translates as the fundamental thoughts of humanity. And his argument was that all consciousness was interlinked and interconnected. And that had a huge influence on the physicists in Germany, Planck, Pauli, Heisenberg, Schrödinger, Einstein. They were all deeply influenced by this, as was Jung. That's where Jung got the idea for the collective unconscious, and that's where Joe Campbell got the idea for the monomyth. These are all evolutions of the same idea, that all consciousness is interconnected and interdependent. And when we look at the experimental data, that's exactly what we see. That we know that, for instance, it's possible through what we call therapeutic intention for a one organism to have a material effect on the well-being of another organism, for good or ill, by the way. And all these studies about healing, almost everybody talks about healing in terms of energy. But it's not energy, it's information, and it's the linkage of information. That's what's causing all of this, what's going on. So in the Awakening novel, what I did was to talk about if we could open to this aspect of ourselves. It's not something coming from outside of us. It is an innate part of us that simply gets overwhelmed by the normal cognitive chatter that goes on in our heads. That's why the people who are good at this are meditators, because we know from research that meditators routinely do better than non-meditators on any non-local task. And the reason is, the key to all of this stuff is the ability to attain and sustain intentioned, focused awareness. That's why meditation is taught in martial arts dojos and Buddhist monasteries, because they both have empirically developed the understanding that the ability to attain and sustain intention-focused awareness allows you to open to this whole other aspect of your consciousness. So I wrote the Awakening novel to make the point, what would that be like if we could do that? Well, for one thing, you wouldn't be able to lie.
Right.
Because it's not just the information, the sort of factual data, but it's your feelings about it, what's motivating you to say it. All of that would be accessible. So you would have to be honest. That's one thing. Mm-hmm. But I tried to explore in that novel, what would it be like if you really could communicate, not just verbally, but if we could link up, not just occasionally as happens, like you had an experience, but if we could do it routinely and open to that aspect of consciousness. And in fact, if you look at the history of people, since he's very well known in the United States, take someone like Edgar Cayce. What Cayce was doing was opening to non-local consciousness, and he was particularly good at it. It spread through the population, like any other skill that humans have. There's a few people at one end who are really good, whether it's golfing or playing the violin or doing mathematics or being able to open the non-local consciousness. And then there's a few people at the other end of the spectrum who just can't get it or won't get it.
Okay, hold on,
and most
because
of us
this
fall
is
somewhere in the middle.
This is where we want to step in, because you've got a class that you teach, Opening to the Infinite. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that. We have to take a break again. This time it's
Sure.
a news break, little commercials. And we'll be back again, my guest, Stephan Schwartz, and talking about non-local consciousness, all sorts of fun stuff that the mind is capable of that we have yet to really empower ourselves with. But it's possible. That's why we're here, all right? KCMO Talk Radio. It's Wendy's Coffee House. There's so many things to explore when you're a kid. And the adults say, you're just imagining. Don't get your hopes up. Everything's just black and white. But when you get into the world of non-local consciousness, and when you start feeling when you think somebody's looking at you and you turn around, sure enough, they are. All those little insights and hints and other parts of your knowing and being are real. So if you want to explore that and find out more about how that works, specifically remote viewing and those kinds of issues, this is a perfect class, because you don't have to leave. You don't have to go anywhere. Opening to the Infinite. It's an online course with Stephan Schwartz, and that's what I like about these kinds of things. So sometimes it's not convenient if you have to go somewhere and sign up and all that good stuff, but this is accessible. Okay, Stephan, what all do people learn through this course?
Well, this course, Wendy, is I put together based on the questions that I kept getting at when I'd go speak at conferences, and I wanted to get the information out in a way that would be less costly to people, because it costs a lot of money to go to conferences and travel, and all that. So I wanted something where you could just do it at your own pace and when you had the time to do it. So I created a workshop called Opening to the Infinite, and it's based on a book I wrote called Opening to the Infinite, which you can get on Amazon and elsewhere. But in any case, what I wanted to do was to give everybody both the art and the science of remote viewing and non-local consciousness. So it covers dream crafting, remote viewing, meditation, therapeutic intention. It's all about how to, in very practical, straightforward terms, how to open to that aspect of yourself so that you can work with therapeutic intention, for instance, or you can do remote viewings, or how do you actually meditate. It's entirely science-based. It's not religious. You might think parts of it were spiritual, but it's very deliberately. You're not having to join something. It's not some cult. It's just the science research, which is not that well known, of what we in the science community have actually learned about non-local consciousness, how it works, how to use it, how to put it to work in your life. It covers everything like how do you create moments of creative insight, how do you work with your dreams, how can you hold someone in healing, and it gives you not only the techniques of how to do it, but the science upon which those techniques are based. And you can go to Glidewing, glidewing.com, glidewing.com, and just go to Opening to the Infinite. It's the website's there, and you can sign up for it, and you do the course. It takes 6 weeks to complete, and you can do it whenever you like.
And you've got great reviews just along on the sidebar here. The depth of information shared in this course is profound. It'll take time to digest it all. I look forward to this challenge, and we'll put into practice what I've learned step by step. The thing when you're saying meditation for modern minds, what is the difference?
Well, if you look at most meditation techniques, they're couched in religion. And that's because religion is essentially a kind of empirical science to help people open to non-local consciousness, only it's all involved with dogma and all sorts of other things. But if you strip away the dogma stuff and most of meditation, of the old meditation techniques, were developed empirically over a period of generations in cultures that were pre-technological, where people didn't move very much. Most people didn't go more than 5 miles from where they were born. They were not overstimulated by an onslaught of radio, television, telephone, computer, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to strip away the sort of the old cultural stuff and place what we actually know about meditation in a modern context that was designed for people who do live in a world where there's telephones and telegraph and television and internet and notepads and social networks and all of that. And it's a technique based on science that will allow you quite quickly to open to this aspect of yourself. And because there's no greater gift that you can give yourself than developing the daily practice of 20 minutes of meditation. I mean, the research on this, there's over 1,000 papers on this subject now. Meditation will raise your IQ, lower your blood pressure, improve your sex life, make you sleep better, make you less stressful, make you healthier. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. So one of the first things that I get into on this course is how to meditate for a modern person, not for somebody that lived in 5th century BCE India. Mm-hmm. And it utilizes all of the techniques that we have developed in the research community, and we've tested them so we know they work. And I wanted to do it so that you didn't have to join something, you didn't have to profess belief in something, all of that. It's just very straightforward, built for the modern culture, and it will get you there.
Okay, now I'm looking at Glidewing, the teachers. There's a really nice, very recognizable names. I'm looking at William Buhlman and some of the other people that I'm familiar with, Patty Ray Avalon, and the other one I'm looking at too is, well, a couple of them, Emmett Goswami and Peter Russell. So these are all the folks who are available through that Glidewing program.
Yeah, it's a very nice course. It was put together by a guy named Robert Felix and his wife Marina, and they really have selected people well, I think. Mm-hmm. They invited me to do this. So I think good thoughts.
You might be biased,
but they really have been, they're very straight people to deal with. They have great integrity. And he really worked hard to put together a selection of courses that would be genuinely helpful for people without requiring them to join a cult or any of that kind of nonsense. So, yes, I have nothing but good things to say about Glidewing, and I put this course together specifically, as I said. It's called Opening to the Infinite, the Art and Science of Remote Viewing and Non-Local Consciousness, because there is still an art part to this as well as a science part.
Well, and so if you're listening, again, Stephan Schwartz is my guest, and using remote viewing, just from some of the stuff that he's done, looking for Cleopatra's Palace, finding different sunken ships in California or off the coast of California and the Bahamas. There are results, concrete evidence this works, and so this is what you'll be learning and finding out more. But I also wanted to go into the 8 laws of change, because that talks about how people can work together to mobilize, to empower each other, and then also see results. And it's fascinating how these things work when you put 2 or 3 together, and all of a sudden come up with a very visible shift in awareness, consciousness, and actions. Are you okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right. In fact, the 8 laws of change is a book that I wrote because as I thought about the research we had done, or I and others had done, on individuals and non-local consciousness, I began to think about, well, what happens if groups of people would get together and hold a common intention? What happens? So I did 18 years worth of research to write that book, and what it shows is that there are basically 8 laws which all the successful positive social transformation movements work out, and that the key to the whole thing is getting people to share collective intention and to act on that intention. So that, I tell people, let me tell your listeners, you want to change the world, here's how you can do it. Every day, you make hundreds of choices. First of all, be aware that you're doing that. Most people, surprisingly, are not. So be aware that you're making all kinds of choices. The toothpaste you buy, the cat food you buy, the place where you put gas in your car, all of those things are choices. So every day you do that, and of the options that are available as you understand them at that moment, you commit to always choose the one that is the most compassionate and life-affirming and fostering of well-being.
Hold on. We're going to take a quick break. We're come back and see beyond that. Okay, there are 8, and who actually has done that people can kind of pattern after. It's like a cheat sheet. Okay, Stephan Schwartz is my guest, and you are listening to Wendy's Coffee House on KCMO Talk Radio. Wendy's Coffee House, KCMO Talk Radio. My guest, again, Stephan Schwartz, and we were talking remote viewing, we were talking consciousness, we were talking aliens. I like that part. But this is the change and how getting people together, you can create change. First, you have to know that every day you're making choices. Just to wrap up and backtrack from what we were going from that last break. You're making choices every day. Make one that is for the best of all, the highest good. And then go from there?
You want to make that which is the most compassionate and life-affirming and fostering of well-being as you understand it. Now, none of the choices may be good choices. We're often faced with situations where not every choice is a good choice, but you always choose the one that of that, whatever's available, is the best choice. Mm-hmm. You're leaning toward the positive. And you tell 10 people that you're doing it and invite them to join you and to tell 10 of their friends. And if the people that are listening to your program right now would do this, they would change the election in 2018.
Wow.
You just do the math. I know there are many, many more people that listen to you than this, but just say there are 1,000 people. Well, they tell 1,000, they tell another 10, that's 10,000 plus the original 1,000, so that's 11,000, and then they tell 10,000, and very quickly you get up into the millions, just 10,000, 100,000, a million, And we know from the research that whenever 10% of a cohort makes a change in consciousness, that the whole cohort, whether it's a school committee or a church group or a nation, everybody has to accommodate. You can see that happening with Me Too right now. You can see that happening with the LGBT shift. You can see that in the fact that you don't see a lot of people smoking anymore. All of those things are examples of how group collective intention expressed through action creates social change.
You mentioned an example.
Well, the Quakers are the best example I can give. There are less than 87,000 Quakers in the United States. In the whole history of the United States going back to the colonial period, less than 500,000. And yet if you look at every major positive social transformation that changed America, penal reform, abolition, public education, the environmental movement, nuclear freeze, women's suffrage. If every time you look at those kind of movements, you get down to the lick log of who started it, it turns out to be a small group of Quakers. Because the Quakers have figured out that when you hold collective intention and you act on it, you create nonviolent social change.
See, that's just phenomenal. Really phenomenal. Okay. I wanted to go back to the getting into that non-local consciousness. So if somebody is listening now and they want to help in way of, coordinating, collaborating with their friends, thinking and believing, there's more to it than that. There's more to just like happy talk and affirmations. How do you activate this energy?
You got to act on it. That's the quotidian choice that I was mentioning. Every day you make choices. Always consistently choose the one that is the most compassionate, life-affirming, and fostering of well-being as you understand it in that moment.
You've been studying consciousness for 40 or 50 years. What have you learned?
That's what I've learned.
That's way too simple.
All consciousness, no, Wendy, all consciousness is interlinked and interdependent. Max Planck is right. You know, in 1931, they asked Max Planck, "You're one of the most famous scientists in the world.
Yes.
What have you learned?"
Yes.
And his answer was, "I've learned that consciousness is fundamental and causal. You can't get behind consciousness. Space-time arises from consciousness, not consciousness from space-time. If we want to understand how the world works, we must understand consciousness."
What is really funny is that is the little blurb that I just put on my blog post for Friday. And I'm thinking, there you go. It all comes back to that, consciousness, and we are more connected than we realize. But every day, in terms of what we bring into our awareness, you can see what your thoughts are telling you, in my opinion.
Yes.
For the session for people who would like to study with you, I think it was at $295 or something for that. Does that rate change, or is that specific?
You know, I'm not actually sure what they charge for it now, but whatever it is, I wanted it to be much less expensive than having to go to a conference. That was the whole point.
Oh, I can vouch for that. Yeah, just the hotel room
for
2 or 3 days.
When you add in today's air flights and hotels and food, going to a conference to hear somebody like me speak can be quite expensive, and I wanted it to be accessible to people, and I wanted it to be at a cost that was reasonable, and the Glidewing people have done an excellent job and allowed me to really get into the things that we've been talking about at depth, and it's all science-based, and because I'm trying to do exactly what I tell you. I try to make good choices every day that are life-affirming and compassionate, and always to act on the things that I think will foster well-being. And making people aware that all life is interconnected and interdependent is a good way to do that.
You get into that with the book Awakening, because you also get into the dolphin consciousness, or the animal.
Yes, all beings are conscious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's part of it. I even got today, the most recent, do animals talk to each other? Yes, and they take turns just like humans. And this is from Newsweek. It's a behavior study. And it's like,
Yes.
Why is this so difficult for us to accept?
Because we started with the idea that we had dominion over the earth and that we were somehow special and that we weren't really a part of the great network of the meta-systems of the earth.
We really disconnected ourselves.
Yes, that we saw the earth as an exploitable bank account. That's where all the extractive industries, all that comes from. We saw the earth as an exploitable bank account that had no consequences. And now we're discovering, oh, yes, there are big consequences. One of them is called climate change.
Okay, now I want to go back to Robert Bigelow.
Okay.
And you have never talked to him about the potential that there is a craft, because he would be, in my opinion, the one guy that might be able to move people on the planet to find out more, or to at least disclose or continue the conversation.
Well, I haven't talked to Bob Bigelow in years. I don't know whether I ever told him that story or not, tell you the truth. And I don't know if he's still active in this area, but if he is, and if you're listening, Bob, give me a call. We'll talk about it.
Or somebody put a bee in Bob's ear. I think I talked to, I'm trying to remember Anderson?
John Alexander.
Yes. Yeah, you're good. You're really good. I talked to John. And Victoria. And so John might be somebody to, carry a message. I really appreciate your time. We got to get out of here. But Stephan Schwartz, if you are listening the show, Awakening, all the links and all that, I'm going to put them on the blog, but you can also go to his website as well and check out the details about what's happening with non-local consciousness and how you are much more powerful than you think. Stephan, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And again, wendyscoffeehouse.com. That's the site. Glidewing.com if you want to sign up for the workshop. And good luck. Remember, you are what you think. Upgrade your thoughts. You'll surprise yourself. Till next time, see ya. Stay curious.